The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Monday. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing okay. Lots to get into on the recruiting front. Tim Verghese inside Nebraska. Tim will be with us here in about 15 minutes or so. What's the latest on some of Nebraska's 2025 targets? A full court press by about everybody on staff to different high schools today for Nebraska football. We'll talk a little Big Red baseball too. The latest projections are out. Maybe a new venue for Coach Bolt and company in the field of 64 for baseball. The roast of all roasts with Tom Brady. Some thoughts on that and plenty of room for you today. You can join us at 489-1240. 489-1240. 800-825-5865 and can always email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. You're welcome to check in on the stream. We'll get our starting five in a moment. Hail Varsity YouTube. That's where you can watch the show, subscribe, and like to the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio, and give us a follow on our own Twitter accounts at Herbalescence for Elijah, at Schmidt_radio for me. We'll do our starting five in just a moment. Some other things to discuss from the weekend. The youth camp that Matt Rule and several Huskers took part of, kind of reigniting that Omaha bond. The other road to Omaha is big. And some odds and ends when we talk about portal. And, oh yeah, some way too early top 25 projections are out, including our friend Joel Klatt and his show. And he has Nebraska in that top 25. Top 25 worthy. I can absolutely talk myself into that when I add all things up as a projection. I can also pump the brakes a little bit as to why they might be a year away from not starting the year or entering into a season, I should say entering into the top 25 at some point. Can Nebraska stay? In a year or two, can they stay at season's end in the top 25? We'll discuss that. Elijah, we had two very different weekends. You got to go and explore nature with Cornhead Lager and some buddies. You went camping. The shot you took and put out on your Twitter handle was awesome. Little sunshine, a Cornhead Lager, and a beautiful, gorgeous, glorious backdrop. Mm-hmm. And then I put on a tie and went to a derby party, had an incredible time at the derby party, and lost $20. That's okay. That's absolutely okay.
That's a part of the fun. That's going to make that eventual winning ticket you have one of these years even more sweet.
See, Mama didn't wear a hat this year, and that was like, where's the bunny's hat? It's like she didn't want to wear a hat this time. So we didn't do the hat.
Is that why you lost? Are you going to pass the buck?
Not at all.
Okay, I
fronted. It was $10 per horse. Her and I both put in horses. I forget who she picked. The horse I chose was it just a touch, something like that.
Well, we laid this out as we discussed yesterday. I actually didn't watch the Derby.
I know you were.
I made it out
enjoying nature.
I made it out to the campground, had the phone off, saw the photo off with the Cornhead Lager, so I turned the phone on, took the picture, tweeted it out, and it was right back to phone off. Mostly because the Nuggets were playing on Saturday night, and I had my DVR set, and I didn't want to spoil it for myself.
That never works.
I successfully did not spoil the game for myself. The key, the big one that always gets me is I'll hop on Twitter and the algorithm will put a Nuggets tweet right at the top and I'll go, oh, well, okay, that's that. So shut the phone off and didn't turn it on until I got essentially back home. I listened to the new Kendrick Lamar diss track as well on the way home on Sunday, and then caught the game and was wildly disappointed. I'm glad I was actually out camping. I was worried about that. I was like, what happens if I miss a classic Nuggets win and I'm out camping and I didn't get to see it live? It was all good. Nuggets lost. They'll get it back tonight.
Nature will always be there.
But it was good. The only complaint I have is my sleep was like a 5 out of 10, but that's to be expected whenever you're sleeping on the ground.
Did you sleep on
camping.
a rock?
No, I have my nice sleeping pad as well. The dew in the morning was a little bit annoying. The fact that our tent started getting a little bit wet, that was not great. Also, the sunrise tends to, whenever you don't have like curtains like you would in a room, the sunrise tends to get you.
To wake you.
So the sleep was not great. I was pretty tired yesterday, but I feel really, really good today. I feel refreshed. Back's a little bit sore, but that's also to be expected.
Well, Brennan from the Black Hills, that's a gorgeous part of nature. He is first in the stream. Tuck is here. And Tuck is asking, we're eager to see if Elijah encountered a bear or a naked man. That goes back to the weekend edition's discussion point. Brandon is in. Good for you, Brandon. Jacob is here. Good to have Jacob in. Tim checks in. NASCAR Eric is here. And KG also in. Brian says, what's up? Justin is here. Roger, good to have you, Roger. And Ascent says, what's up? Scott is here. And Scott, you see I called Mystic Dan for the win. You did, Scott. That's awesome. And that was an incredible finish. 35% viewer bump in the Derby this year, but it was the 150th running. I don't know a damn thing about horse racing other than I loved the spectacle. The bourbon tasted great as well.
That's a good thing. I also had some fantastic bourbon this weekend as well.
Okay, just two different venues.
Yeah, I'm not going to... Should I shout out the brand? Sure. There was some Buffalo Trace on sale at Hy-Vee, so I got myself a bottle of that. And then also a bottle of this stuff that's almost 120 proof. So that was to Aiden's sleep on Saturday night. Sleeping on the ground.
I brought some of... Buddy Big Jake, he's a whiskey/bourbon connoisseur. And so we bought a bottle last summer. He bought a bottle, I bought a bottle. And not much of a dent's been made in said bottle because it's the type of whiskey when you would pour it, I swear it would singe the top of a barroom table in the Old West. That's how just paint peeling this stuff is. So I brought that as my rent for the Derby party, and then I also brought some Bullet Rye.
Okay, nice.
So
nice.
the everyone can have, and all right, how much hair on your chest do you have, or do you want to grow here? And away we went.
The one thing I've found with whiskey, and I'm not sure if this is also a part of this conversation, the more you spend on it, the less I want to drink it. Because
you want to savor it.
Yeah, you want to savor it.
It's a special occasion
and
thing.
It's like at the end of the day, like it's for drinking. So I've essentially found the point of diminishing returns on a bottle of whiskey is that about that $50 range, where once you get a little more expensive than that, A, is the extra $10, $15 you're spending worth it in terms of flavor? No, usually not. And then B, the fact like once you spend $100 bottle of whiskey, I don't want to drink it anymore. Because I look at that bottle of whiskey and I go, I don't want to drink it now. I spent $100 on that thing.
I'll spend $100 again. You don't go cheap on booze, on food, on clothes. Period.
Can I add, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, tools as well.
Right. No, you're right.
It depends how much you're using it. If it's like a single-use type tool, sure, go cheap. But like if you're going to have tools, again, another free shout-out, go for the Milwaukee. Go for the nice stuff. Go for the stuff that's going to last you 25 years. And not just hype. You could argue that Snap-on's got hype behind it. It's not that great. Like I'm a Milwaukee man myself. Like don't skimp out on tools either.
Iowa Russ did not skimp out. He emails in, bravo, Russ, for the Derby party. It was awesome. Still need that video of all of us screaming for our horse to kick it into gear. But he had the Old Forester mint julep brought in, smuggled in from his buddy Derek in Iowa. Because it was just hard to locate. Let's get to some college football. Let's hear from Joel Klatt. What's his take?
One last thing here. Roger says don't go cheap on head coaches.
Yes, or assistant coaching pool.
Or buyouts if it's time. Nebraska is the perfect example there.
That's a pretty good idea.
Why wait 2 weeks and save $7.5 million with the disaster you have right now?
Mickey, you take the keys. All right. So, Roger, good point. You don't go cheap on coaches. You don't go cheap on assistants. You don't go cheap on assistant coach summary. You don't go cheap on NIL. That needs to be added to the list of things to not go cheap on. KG says you don't go cheap on the devil's lettuce either, I've been told. So there we go.
Good for you, KG.
Yeah, KG. Don't go cheap on NIL offers in the portal, says Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. See these can of worms we've opened up. Other things to not go cheap on. This is probably fair. KG says don't go cheap on lawyers during a divorce, I've been told. Okay.
Noted.
The noted, and why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth it. Let's hear from Joel Klatt.
Let's hope your wife isn't listening.
No. I love her. She knows it. So, Joel Klatt, Nebraska comes in his early preseason top 25 at number 22. Ohio State has not gone cheap on NIL. After 3 straight losses to Michigan, they have gone all in, you know this, with not only Chip Kelly as their OC, but guess who's making the phone calls? Really good article in The Athletic on Friday on just Ohio State ramping things up. And the guy that's making the call is not AD Gene Smith. Gene Smith's retiring, I think, June 30th. But it's Ryan Day making the phone call to the donors. Hey, dude, thanks for the support. You know you're important to us. Let's go grab dinner. Let's go play a round of golf. And let me tell you, as a head coach, how your money's being spent for all student athletes. Versus, hey, it's Gene. Guess what I'm calling for? Athletic development. You got a check you can send us. Same answer, same question, different feel when the head coach is scratching your back. All right, Joel Klatt says what about Nebraska for 2024?
I think Nebraska is going to be a pretty darn good football team. They won 5 games a year ago in year number 1 for Matt Rule, and yet they should have been a lot better. Their defense was a top 20 defense in the country, scoring and yards. And granted, you could say that about a lot of Big Ten West teams, but those were the numbers. They lost 4 games by exactly 3 points. And in those games, they had 15 turnovers. Folks, 15 turnovers. 13 of those 15 were by the quarterbacks. They were minus 17 in the turnover margin last year, which was the second worst in the country. So they lost. They won 5 and they lost 4, all by exactly 3 points with those turnover numbers. It does not take a rocket scientist to know that if Dylan Raiola is just a little bit better at quarterback, which I think he can be, in particular from a turnover standpoint, this could easily be a team that wins 8 or 9 football games. Nebraska is a good program, and I think Matt Rule is a heck of a coach. He's worked everywhere that he's been. Temple, Baylor. They don't have to play Oregon. They don't have to play Michigan, and they don't have to play Penn State. To me, they could be 7-0 headed into that Ohio State game. I think their toughest game before that game is probably Colorado. We'll see if they can beat Colorado, and that's in the eighth game of the year, that Ohio State game. I think Nebraska is an interesting one. They could wind up a lot higher than this. Watch out for Nebraska.
So Joel Klatt likes to really dive into his research. He's connected, and he's a buff. And I don't say that to throw shade at him. He's a guy that you know how they're brought up in Colorado about Nebraska. And he's the top college football analyst there is, especially with where he's at in Fox and the way they've kind of revamped being Big Noon and what they have there. So he's plugged in. He knows Nebraska, and he is not blowing smoke. He's not looking for clicks. He's not looking for segments. He's a guy that has done the math, and he laid out the why.
Wait, I mean,
and the math is simple. Don't suck at handling and holding on to the football. And you probably win 2 more games.
I mean, is anything he said their opinion?
No, it's all fact. It's all numbers.
It's all fact. It's all almost indisputable.
The opinion is you're going to get better quarterback play, or the projection is you're going to get better quarterback play. The opinion is your defense is going to be as good or better as last year. And the reality is you don't have – schedule is not fun or easy in November, but by then you should be a pretty salty football team to go handle it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the assumptions that you're making there, if you're Joel, which we've kind of gone up, is the defense will not take a step back with all the starters coming back. The offense will show development and will get better with some more key playmakers in there, more starts under the belt of the offensive line, another transfer in Mazuka. That could be a big piece of that offensive
competency.
Line. And then one of the top quarterbacks in the country. You add that to the mix, does it help the turnover issue?
Whoever wins your quarterback job, and we know who we think wins the quarterback job, they don't turn it over.
It's a case of if Nebraska everywhere but the quarterback position can remain steady or get slightly better, last year's team is probably 8 wins with a better quarterback, cutting down on turnovers, probably. That's hard to say, but probably. So if you can do that again with a new quarterback that can make slight improvements at the quarterback spot, it's not crazy.
3
to say
more
this team
points,
could be 8 or 9
Elijah.
wins.
3 more points. You could say, you could argue for a 9-win team a year ago. I mean, if it all breaks right for you. Offense wasn't that good. What's Tim Verghese say about the next quarterback in Lincoln?
And now, back to
locked in with Nebraska and a busy day. Tim, how many miles the staff put on their cars today?
Good bit. Primarily, traveling around the Omaha area today. But yeah, good to see them making the rounds. And I'm surprised at how deep they're moving. School to school, it's like 8 to 10 of them at each school.
Do they have like a little? Probably it's this contingent of SUVs that shows up, right? And hey, the staff's here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking they got to be like, if they're in the big old van, they got to be redlining that thing to make it to these high schools in the time that they're doing it. Like how fast they going down these rural Nebraska highways, making it to whatever high school they're going to. It's insane.
Well, you got to know the back roads.
Yeah.
But getting to Central or to Millard South.
What do you think drives on these trips like this?
It's easy, Ed. I mean, Mr. Foley is the driver, man. I would put money. We'll have to ask him. But
the hard part's got to be whoever is running the music for the road trip to be able to make everybody happy in the vehicle. Like, what do you put on?
It's a good call. I don't know. We gotta, when it's an all staff outing. Who's picking the? Does the OC get to pick the music? Does the DC get to pick the music?
You probably put like one of the younger staffers on it. They're probably just listening to the entire Kendrick and Drake beef as they're going around.
I'm sure they are, but but not everybody on staff is 25.
Yeah,
that's fair.
All right. I mean, if Ed's driving, I'm saying Ed's probably got some Rolling Stones going.
Does he strike you like a Grateful Dead kind of guy? Because you could put on one Grateful Dead album, and as long as this one song could get you from Millard South to Omaha.
I know
North.
you get the old Live 72 version, and you would need to consult Mike Babbers on what Dead album to put on. But Tim, let's start off with the camp this weekend in Omaha, and I want to get your take with Coach Rule and some of the players that did the 2-session camp in Omaha, and was going to be at Central. It ended up being at Norris Middle School, 3rd through 8th graders. But Nebraska's priority here is the best word to really kind of show up and show out and hammer those relationships and first and foremost give back from a time standpoint to so many kids in the city of Omaha.
Yeah, like this, to me, I think more so than any type of recruiting pitch or anything you can get from that, this just like at the end of the day, this is just a staff that cares, a staff that like cares about the community. I mean, I live in Omaha, you know, and I've like walking around here, I've seen Matt Rule around, like I've seen staffers around, like they enjoy it up here. And, you know, they're trying to bridge that gap in a sense. You know, I think there has been a bit of a gap that's been created, you know, over the last couple of years, maybe even, you know,
it goes back
I'm
a
not
ways.
an expert here. It goes back a ways. But there was definitely a bit of a gap, and something I've noticed as well. But, you know, I think just getting these kids re-excited about Nebraska football, you know, getting the parents involved, showing them, hey, like, we're authentic, we care, because that camp doesn't just have an impact on the kids that were in attendance. It has an impact on the parents that were watching, parents that are fans or might not be fans of the program, but, you know, more than likely than not, they're fans of the program. But this, you know, you're gaining trust. You're gaining trust with these people, and, you know, really, again, immersing yourself in the community. On the recruiting side of things, you know, this touches on something I think I touched on a couple weeks ago. When I stopped by Warren Academy, when I first got back to the state, got back on the beat, I was astounded at how many just players there were. Like, just how many people were training, how fast and how quick like this, like sports, specifically football, has like grown in terms of just like how many prospects there are up here, like guys that I'm seeing in like 7th, 8th grade that I'm like, okay, this is like a projectable frame. This is a guy that, you know, is at least, you know, has a D1 like potential, you know what I mean? Like these are, you're seeing a lot more of that, where like, you know, back in the day, it was like a handful of those guys. And so again, investing in the community at a young age like this, when the community is at this point where like, hey, the talent that's coming up at a young age is better and better, it'll pay off down the line. Again, these aren't results you're looking for immediately. It also speaks to the commitment of the staff. These type of camps aren't something that, you know, benefits the staff in any way, at least right now. This is a benefit for the program, you know, 5 years from now, not right now.
It's long term.
Tim, is it fair to say, in your opinion, that you can cast a wider net within Nebraska, within that 500-mile radius? Is it less damaging to take a swing and a miss on an in-state kid than a kid from somewhere else across the country?
I don't know. I get into these debates often because depending on the school you're at and where you're at, like it depends. Like again, I covered Michigan, I covered Texas A&M. So down in Texas, for example, you know, like there are times where Texas and Texas A&M will be like, okay, this kid from Dallas is picking up all these national offers. Let's wait, because we don't want to completely, you know, burn a bridge where we offer a kid early and, you know, 2-3 years from now, when that kid's a senior, he, you know, didn't develop the way we thought. He's no longer has a committable offer. And, you know, we have to have a hard conversation at an in-state school, a school that, you know, we want to continue to pull from. This staff doesn't seem to care. So speaking about this staff specifically, they don't seem to care. They are more than willing to make that early offer. They're more than willing to, you know, be the first, go out on a limb. You know, they've done it with a couple of guys at this point in and out of the state. I don't know about risk necessarily, you know, because like, okay, take a guy like, I mean, in this 25 cycle, for example, take like Riemann Ziebert, for example. You know, if Nebraska ultimately, depending on how this tight end room, they already have one commit, you know, if Chase Lofton commits, or they get another, you know, a national type tight end to commit, and suddenly there's not a spot for Riemann, like, you know, is that something that bridge is burnt, or do they just go their separate ways? And, you know, let's say Springfield, Platteview has another prospect, you know, in a couple of years, and is Nebraska able to get back in there, you know, no harm, no foul? I don't know. That's something we'll have to figure out.
Tim Verghese with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Tim, of course, with Rivals Inside Nebraska. Tim Verghese on Twitter is where you follow him. Tim, give me your feel right now on TJ Lateef. There's some smoke around maybe a commitment. Is his timeline the same? Is it different? How are you hearing things?
I feel like we're getting closer. I think something to note, you know, some of those I mentioned when we talked about them last week, you know, it felt like it was Nebraska and a bunch of these other schools, you know, but of those schools that are, you know, quote unquote, still in the mix, you know, Colorado was one, UCLA was a little bit involved. Arizona was a little bit involved. UCLA just took a transfer quarterback like 20 minutes ago from Washington, a 2024 signee. And then Colorado, like 10 minutes ago, just offered had a workout with a quarterback out in California named Jaden O'Neal, and then offered him. So Colorado appears to be moving on to other. And Colorado at this point, they don't have a big board like that. They're not really recruiting high school prospects like that. So this is, them offering a quarterback's a pretty big deal, and probably should be a sign of, kind of what's to come. But he's been, like I kind of said last week, he's still been radio silent. But again, just from what people I've talked to and sources just indicate that a decision feels like it's coming. It feels impending. It's just kind of like a matter of when, not if at this point.
Is the race Nebraska and Arizona right now?
Nebraska, yeah. Arizona's in there. Again, Colorado's in there, but I don't think that's happening, But yeah, it's a couple in there. But like, again, at this point in where he's coming out of that visit, I don't think it's like I don't think there's like a whole lot of schools really that can push Nebraska out of their spot at the top right now.
So probably just a matter of time if that's the direction things go.
Well, I know we've kind of gone over this before, Tim, but with that in mind, Nebraska, the likely landing spot, what do you see in Lateef, the player? Obviously going to be a guy that's probably going to sit for a couple of years should he make it to Nebraska behind Raiola. If what we're seeing with our own two eyes about Raiola ends up being the truth, you expect him to sit for a little bit. What do you like about him as a prospect, and developmentally, what do you think he is? Maybe a comparison for what type of player he is?
Yeah, I was writing something on him recently for our message board, and was trying to think of a comp there. The one that kept coming to mind, it's like a twitchier Sam Hartman, if that makes sense. He's like a shorter, he's listed, depending on what site you go to, some have him listed as 6'3", some 6'2". I've got it verified. He's closer to like 6'1", 6'2"-ish. And so it's like a slighter frame, but like a prototypical QB size, not necessarily a short guy, not necessarily like a super big guy or anything. As a quarterback, I'll say he's very polished. He's accurate, pretty consistent accuracy, across all three levels, short, intermediate, deep, consistent velocity, does a really good job of using touch and like layering throws in, especially out to the sideline, layering throws in over guys. He's great in the quick game, like especially good in the quick game, pretty good on the run. Like the one thing with him, and I the way I prefaced it to the board was, this isn't a Logan Smothers, hey, this guy doesn't have a super strong arm. This is a strong arm in the sense that he's going to hit with velocity and accuracy, the short, intermediate, and up to like 40, 50 yards deep, but he's not launching like 60, 70-yard bombs. But there's very few quarterbacks. There's a handful of quarterbacks every cycle, if even that, every cycle that can actually, hit those 60, 70-yard bombs with consistency. Like I prefaced that on the board. I was like, listen, these Dylan Raiola types obviously are rare, but and when you're looking for that next quarterback, this is what you're looking. You're looking for a guy that if the number one goes down, a very steady, reliable arm that can process, get through reads quick, is going to deliver with, timing and accuracy. And, he's not going to have any trouble like running the offense. He does this already, at the high school level, running a pretty fast-paced offense down there.
Tim, I'm going to need 5 minutes on the other side if we can get it. Talk a little bit about some of the time Nebraska spent in state with Lofton and company. A guy that just watching a little bit of Lateef's film, Stroud, and I hate saying that, but just...
We have a big C.J. Stroud stand here in Tim.
I mean, am I crazy off with Stroud?
No, not crazy. I mean, it's the same things with Stroud that you loved out of high school. Because the same things with Stroud you loved out of high school was like, again, that accuracy, the timing, the precision, the processing speed. Like those aren't things. That's a guy. Both these guys. These are guys that are mentally years ahead than the normal high school quarterback.
More with Tim Verghese on the way with Hail Varsity.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
A little bit of overtime here with Tim Verghese inside Nebraska rivals. And we're talking recruiting, some thoughts last segment as we wound down on TJ Lateef. If there's an announcement forthcoming, as Nebraska's done a good job of looking at him for their 2025 quarterback spot. Tim, awesome info as always. We started off talking about in-state and the importance for Nebraska to be out and about. They have been, the entire staff with the exception of Rule. They've been at Millard South today. They've been at Omaha Central today in the Metro. They've been at Platteview today. And I want to get your take on just where things sit with Lofton, the 2025 tight end for Millard South. And, of course, Zebert also from Platteview. Both those guys are high targets in, I guess we'll call Nebraska the tight end state because of so many tight ends that have propped up just those great athletic, large bodies that can run and block.
Yeah, Nebraska's let both these guys know their priorities. Nothing's changed, even since the commitment of Bear Tenney for either of these guys and, where Nebraska sees both of them. With Lofton, that recruitment's gone national. He's got official visits planned to Florida State, Texas A&M, and Nebraska. There's another school or two that could work themselves into that mix. He's got a couple others he's considering. Right now with him, I've gotten the read that between Colin Klein and then Christian Ellsworth, Nebraska former graduate assistant former off-field assistant who's now at Texas A&M, he's pretty much he's not an on-field coach, but he's essentially their tight ends coach. But between Ellsworth and Klein, A&M is right in that mix. And one thing they're hammering is the college town. If he went down and visited, he liked College Station, likes the college atmosphere. That's a factor for him. Likes it down there. Obviously a Midwest kid. Weather's not really going to be a factor for him. But you've got an SEC opportunity in a place like College Station where it's warmer. Then that is something that even if it's not something that we take super seriously in terms of like a real recruiting thing, it's something that A&M is using. They're like, hey, the warmer weather's better. We don't get snow down here. You don't have to worry about any of that. And that is something A&M's using. So I get the read right now that A&M and Nebraska are kind of neck and neck right now. It's kind of those two right there. Florida State's working too. Florida State's will let them know like, hey, you're a priority as well here. We get the ball to the tight end. They've talked to him about like, the way they use Jaheim Bell, what they plan to do with the tight ends this year. A&M as well, trying to show him, just kind of what they've done with the tight ends, where their room's at, what they've done. So it's kind of coming down to these three schools right now. I don't think like Kansas State was one that was mentioned early with him. I think that recruitment's gotten to the point where it's beyond Kansas State. There was originally that connection because his brother was there. But I just think that one's a little bit, it's gotten national at this point. With Riemann, that's one that's going to take OVs to kind of figure out where these schools kind of stand. He's been out to Duke, he's been out to Nebraska, of course, but he's really looking forward to getting out to Stanford, and Stanford's really making him a priority. Stanford's pushing really hard for him. They've stopped by the school in the last week or so to go see him. Kansas State's working there as well. Duke's working there as well. Education's, a factor here. That's something he's evaluating at all these stops. And obviously, Stanford and Duke, those are heavy, that's tough. It's competing against those, on the recruiting side when you're going education wise, it's tough. But, Nebraska's let him know like, hey, and I think guys, because Riemann's blow up happened so much later than Chase, I think the national or like the Nebraska, the average Nebraska fan is aware of Chase Lofton. They might not be about Riemann. I think go back and watch Riemann's tape. He's a different type of tight end. He's more of like a stretch the field, like, going to have to line him up at wide, but he's a dynamic talent, man. Like I was really, really impressed watching through his film and kind of seeing the stuff that like, hey, with a year or two in the weight room, he's got an interesting body type, but a year or two in the weight room, add some mass on him, he could be really, really good. Like I think his ceiling is comparable to Chase, even though the ranking is so much different. I think the ceilings are very comparable.
Tim, we've talked before about Christian Jones, but while we're talking in-state kids, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention him. I'd assume he's still priority number 1 in the class of 2025. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. I know he's coming off a weekend unofficial visit to Tennessee. The who's who of college football still going after Christian Jones, but Nebraska's still firmly in that mix.
Yep, Nebraska very much firmly in that mix. And I think I said it on here a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, I mean, still hearing like, hey, Notre Dame's fading from here, which bodes well for Nebraska. That's another one. We're getting to the point now where with some of these guys where I think the only thing that's left and the only thing that's really going to separate some of these schools at the top for them is these OVs. For Chase, he doesn't have a whole lot of them scheduled, if any yet. But he's, USC's one that's like a new school that's relatively in the picture. They've got some Midwest ties working there. Former North Dakota State head coach is now the linebackers coach over there. So there's a Midwest tie there that's working hard. That's a guy that knows how to recruit West Side as well. So, he's working there. Tennessee's working there. I'm not really sure with Jones at this point. I'm not really sure, what is left for Nebraska. I'll say that, he's been to campus. I mean, over the course of his collegiate or his high school career, I think he's been to Lincoln like 20 times. Like he's visited 20 times across multiple staffs at this point. So the facilities were a big deal this last time. And I think something that stuck out to me when I was just texting with him after the spring game, he noted just like how good it was to see, how refreshing it was to see just guys flying around out there, how the offense looked. Like, I think for him at this point, I think he just wants to see Nebraska like look improved on the field. I think that's really pretty much the last thing Nebraska has to prove to him. And I think, I don't know exactly what a timeline looks like for him, but I wouldn't be surprised with him and a couple of guys, where Nebraska suddenly, not even suddenly, but like Nebraska just checks that final box in that first month of the season, when they have this start to the year that I think we can all of us who've seen them, through spring ball kind of foresee what it could look like in the season.
Yep. The exclamation point, a good September, right?
Yes.
And a great job there of laying that out without adding to the Kool-Aid. That was a great way to
well phrased.
To preview the beginning of the season.
Tim Verghese, Inside Nebraska Rivals, and at Tim Verghese on Twitter. Follow him there.
Tim, last thought before we get you out: Kendrick or Drake?
Ooh, Kendrick. I mean, it's kind of ugly. I've had some serious conversations with some friends this weekend about, man, Drake might need to just take a step back, just to go on vacation.
Maybe go to therapy.
Something like that. Tim, awesome work. Appreciate you giving us some time today, man.
Of course. Appreciate y'all.
There he is. Tim Verghese with us. Good to have him. As we went 2 segments with him, but that's okay. Great knowledge, great intel, not only on Lateef, the quarterback that Nebraska's targeting for 2025, but also where Jones is and Lofton and Ziebert. And that was some great info on just the who's who going after Ziebert from Platteview, and just where Tim thinks he's at based on his film assessment. Tim's seen some of the best names to come down the pike at different schools over his years. We'll wind down hour 1 coming up.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff this first hour. Tim Verghese with Inside Nebraska. Mr. Blackshirt coming up in about 10 minutes. Charlie McBride, a Monday with Charlie. Then Jay Moore will join us. Blackshirt Husker NFLer Jay Moore checks in his thoughts on all sorts of things and a lot of Omaha theme because of just Nebraska's time there this weekend. 489-1240, 489-1240, numbers to get in here on Hail Varsity Radio. Can also email Chris at hailvarsity.com. More of your comments, too, in the StreamYard. Can check the show out that way. Hail Varsity YouTube, like and subscribe, and make it happen that way. Want to remind you to get buckled up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click, a message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We started the show off talking about Joel Klatt and his preseason top 25. We heard from Joel Klatt where Nebraska comes in the ranking. They come in at number 22. And pretty impressive, Elijah, with the new Big Ten, all 18 teams. Well, you have 11 Big Ten teams in this preseason top 25. Now, some new names that are getting a little love based on how the season finished. You have Missouri that's getting some hype, and that was a hell of a win in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. Your number one preseason team is going to be Ohio State. Oregon comes in at 4. Iowa's in there at 24 or 23, I think. SC's 16 or 17. And then you have Penn State and Michigan 8th and 9th, respectively. I think that's where they're at. I'm trying to come off memory here. But long and short of it, it's a schedule that you can ramp up to and if you do your job. But I like the fact that Nebraska's doing work on the recruiting trail, not just with what they want at tight end, but if they're able to land TJ Lateef, that'll be fantastic. And that is not only impressive because of where he is at in the quarterback projection, another high-level quarterback. You just got Dylan Raiola, but you could almost chalk it up to a couple of things. One, all right, you've seen Raiola come in with talent, and he looked the part for sure, but Nebraska is not pumping the brakes on that competition side of things. They're not going to, try and scare off a would-be quarterback or a current quarterback room.
Well, it's the strategy that I think is really interesting in that, what are the positions we're talking about today? Quarterback and tight end. Two positions that you think Nebraska probably has their starter 4 years from now already on the roster. Whether if it's Raiola and he goes 4 years, awesome. You have a guy in Kalen that could bide his time if Raiola ends up going to an NFL season early, which would be a best-case scenario. You have that guy. I mean, at tight end, you have Carter Nelson, who you're expecting to be here for 4 years, not 5. Like, you have two rooms there that are pretty solid as it stands, but that's not stopping Nebraska. Nebraska is recruiting with foresight and understanding, hey, just because things locked up as it stands right now for 4 years doesn't mean 4 years from now our vision's actually going to be what it is. Transfer portal, NFL draft, injuries, development, all wild cards. We're just going to keep on recruiting and keep on stacking.
Well, the thing that's really awesome for Nebraska is the talent and work ethic in the quarterback room from the players, but what you have in Glenn Thomas as the coach. Coach McBride, Anonymous, has got a question for him. We'll talk to Uncle Charlie next.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you at Tower 2. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Can watch the show. Find us on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Like and subscribe there. Can also watch, rewind, and catch it on your time. A lot of the full show is posted on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for the digital/audio podcast version, as we'll do the Blackshirt Hour here. We kick things off with Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride, a Monday with Charlie, and Jay Moore going to be with us here in about 20 minutes. Emails can come in, chris@hailvarsity.com. So some questions in, and from time to time we play Ask Uncle Charlie. And there's some comments and questions in from, as he calls himself, Anonymous. But Coach McBride, good to spend a Monday with you. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. I don't know anything about football, but I know a lot about the racetrack.
Well, that's where I wanted to go. I lost my $10 wager and my wife's $10 wager at my buddy Iowa Russ's. He throws a deck party every year, and it dates all the way back to 2011. And I have yet to win. but his bourbon is always tasty. So it's a great time, and it was such just a fierce event. I thought the deck was going to collapse because people were screaming and jumping up and down, cheering for their horse, and it was a sight to behold. Did you enjoy the Derby Saturday?
Sure, except I didn't like what my horse did. That my wife always gets so mad at me because she says, he can't remember anybody's name, but he knows if they're 6'4", 250, run a 4.6, and have a 3.8 grade point average, and he can remember all that stuff. And his number's 28. And so she said, what horse are you for? I mean, they expected the name. I said, number 6.
That's okay.
Oh, yeah, that was wonderful. It looked like to me when I saw it started out and it was in second place, and all of a sudden he was third from the back.
Yeah, he faded a little bit. That wasn't any good. That wasn't any good.
But it's okay to be a numbers guy and not a names guy. All our minds work in different ways, and being a numbers guy is advantageous. Most people end up, like on Wall Street, but it helps as a football coach too.
Mm-hmm. The numbers, I like it. Coach, I want to go ahead. Charlie McBride's with us here on Hail Varsity. Coach, do we still have you? We lost you for a sec. You have connection?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was here. I just shut my mouth for a minute.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Well, no, Derby's a good time, and I want to ask you about something that Matt Rule and his staff were doing this past weekend, and then they had a youth camp in Omaha for 3rd through 8th graders, and they're spending time all over the state, but they're also really focusing in on Omaha, and I know a big help with that has been Abdul Muhammad with his work with the Boys and Girls Clubs up there in Omaha, and I wanted to get your take on just kind of being able to reconnect in, the state's largest city for Nebraska football as a program.
Well, number one, that's the smartest thing I've ever heard anybody do is talk to kids that are young because they grow up very impressionable. Mm-hmm. And I've lost kids, and when you find out why they went to a certain place, I lost a kid to Texas one time, and I thought when I was at Nebraska, and I thought we're going to get this. It was a center. And he said, well, I grew up in, and when I found out, he grew up in Texas. He was there till he was like 14 years old. And it goes back, and then he said, that's why I just was such a fan of the Longhorns. I couldn't get it out of my system. And he ended up being an All-American, believe it or not. Mm. And but that's what happens to kids. They hook on to something, and when you have people like Abdul and some of those people that were very successful and things like that, it's impressionable. And somehow they don't know exactly why, but they want to go to Nebraska. And Nate Turner was the number one receiver in the country. Mm-hmm. And I went to his house one night, and his dad told me that he was wants him to go to Notre Dame. His mom wanted him to go anywhere. And it was so cold out, I couldn't believe it. And I went out, he said, as I left, he said, can I walk you out to the car? And he had a T-shirt on. And I said, yeah, I guess. He went out and he said, Coach, I just want to tell you I'm coming to Nebraska. And he hadn't even visited. And I wonder why. He said, well, because every Thanksgiving we have a game after the Oklahoma-Nebraska game. And I'm always Nebraska, and I've always been Nebraska, and I want to go there. But don't tell my dad yet. I'll have to work on him. And he did, and he came, and he's went to the Buffalo Bills and played, and was a very successful guy.
Charlie McBride's with us. Coach, you're right. I mean, it's being able to connect with that next generation, and there's a next generation of Nebraska kids to make an impression on. And my household, I've got a 17-year-old. He's going on 30, he thinks, but
right.
there's just as not there's not as much red in his closet. It's not that we didn't offer to get him Nebraska stuff as a kid, but he just, Nebraska had not been at the level. I think Coach Bo signed a picture for him and his buddies, and this was just by chance. So he liked Nebraska until, Bo was here, through when Bo was here. But after that, he's just kind of he was shopping for a team, right? And
right.
Why give him a choice, I guess? be in their face in a good way with the product on the field where you want to grow up and go play for Nebraska.
Right. I think if in most cases you'll go back, and I've always said this when 5 visits came up. Mm-hmm. My dad said something to me one time, and I thought he was goofy. Everybody wants these 5 visits. You get 5, you can go all these places. You don't want to go to 5 different schools, and so I always would encourage coaches to say have them write down their top 3 schools.
Right.
And they won't even be able to do that. It's the guy that comes in and gives them the biggest line, and I'll visit your school. And they didn't ever think about that school before. That doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it really doesn't. It goes back to where their gut is, their gut feeling about, and I'll promise you, kids will tell you when they're seniors, at least 2 schools that they would consider seriously. And then if they don't get it, those 2 schools, then they got to go somewhere else. But the really, really good players are different. And the thing that's a shame about now is it isn't that way anymore. With some kids, it's the almighty dollar, mm-hmm. and it's all kinds of. I mean, there's things I could go down the line with, and it's sad. I always used to tell players, look at. If you want to commit here and right now, then you better go out and take a walk around the campus and be sure this is the campus you want to be walking around, because you're going to get a feeling for this campus by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I had kids go out and walk around the campus and come back in and say they didn't change, and then I said go home and let it sink in for a while. And tell me after 3 days you feel the same. And if they did, they did. Mm-hmm. And that they never changed their minds if they did that, And some kids will say, they want to come, they're all fired up. But again, when you're young and you're working with a guy that has been an All-American, that is a guy that you respect a lot, and Abdul's that kind of kid. He's got an electricity about him. When you talk to him, he means it, and those are kids that really hang on to that stuff.
Coach Charlie McBride with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, talking a little bit of recruiting in state. And Coach, you talked about now with recruiting changing, a lot of it coming down to the almighty dollar. Does that underscore the importance of Nebraska getting out into the youth, the guys that are 3rd through 5th graders now, the ones that are going to be recruits 8 years from now? Does that underscore the importance of Nebraska getting out? The fact that, it does come down to the dollars and cents for a lot of kids now, but you really can't take away the fact that if a kid's wanted to go to Nebraska since he was in 3rd grade, it adds a little bit of something to a recruiting battle, if you will.
Those dollars they won't do it. Most kids can do it. Unless they've been brought up to a way to, take the dollar, take the money. Mm-hmm. And I can't. Everybody I've seen, I swear that. I could name. I went into a kid's house with Coach Osborne one time in St. Louis, and Michigan coach is walking out, and his words were to us on, "Get your bag of money ready, Coach." and we walked in, and his dad was there and said, "Well, did you see have you seen his highlight film?" Tom said, "I've seen that. I'd just like to talk to your son." He said, "Well, we got to talk. What's your deal?" What's your deal? And he said, room, board, books, tuition, and fees, a full NCAA scholarship, and that's it. And he says, no, what's the real deal? And that about blew. I thought Tom Osborne was going to look like a rocket ship and go through the ceiling.
What's your deal? What's your pitch?
He walked. The kid wouldn't come in the room. Didn't come in the room. And Coach Osborne got up and walked in the kitchen. The kitchen door was closed. He pushed it open. And the mother and the kid were in there. He said, come on in here. I want to give my speech. And he did. He came in and told them all about the school and went through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And walked out the door and turned to me and said, don't ever call that kid again. Yeah. And that's the way he felt about it. And that's the way, when you get somebody like that. And guess what? He was a third-team running back at a school. And the last time he carried the ball, he actually threw it on the ground and fell down when we had guys coming in his face. And so, that's what happens with people like that. Mm-hmm. And he had a nice car. It was a gold and black car. It was wonderful. He was just having a good time. He's a nothing now.
Wow.
But I mean, I could name 100 of some of these goofballs that do that kind of stuff.
The shakedown before the NIL era. Wow.
Go where your heart is, because you got 4 years of your life, mm-hmm. and you can't eat the football. So
that's a new one. I like that.
You can't eat the football. I love it. Charlie McBride's with us. A Monday with Charlie. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, last thought as we wind it down, and it's always great to chat with you on things. I'm interested here with your reaction. Joel Klatt put out his preseason top 25, and he has Nebraska in 22. How does that grab you? Is that too much too soon, or do you like the upside projection on Nebraska maybe being ranked this year?
It fits in where things are going.
Okay.
That's how you go. It fits in with how Coach is running things right now. He's not pushing it. He's just trying to say we're going to get better. Mm-hmm. It's not some kind of a. He does what he feels is best, that he feels is the right thing to do, and that. His heart's in the right place, I always used to say, and it's just a hard thing for a lot of guys that do that kind of stuff. And Joel is really a good. He's really a smart guy, and he knows what he's doing. And I think it's a great thing for Nebraska myself. Yeah. I think it shows that you can get better. You're there. You can get better. People are thinking of you a lot better, and now go do it.
Mm-hmm. That's very fair. Coach, we'll check in with you next Monday, and this was a lot of fun. Always appreciate the time.
Okay. I like the weather now better.
Well,
I feel better.
We're bracing for some storms later.
Yeah, speak for yourself.
Yeah.
No. We're not going to have those. They're going to stop.
We might. So we're headed up to see you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, Coach. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
There he is, Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride, A Monday with Charlie.
Ooh, he was on one today.
Well, but that's so much fun to hear his perspective on those days where Nebraska had a talent scouted, and then what environment are you rolling into? Our old dear friend, the late departed Jack Pierce, said some kids want to shake your hand with their palm out and up. That's how they shake hands in this house. And you got to overcome it. Jay Moore's on the way.
All-State, 2-year starter, and rush in for the Big Red and NFL vet.
Is Dudeness or Duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
It's Blackshirt Jay Moore with Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity. The Blackshirt Hour continues. It's Jay Moore, Blackshirt Husker NFLer at Jay Moore 44. Follow him on Twitter. You watch him on Big Red Wrap-Up during the season and different parts of the year. Jay, good to spend some time. How we doing?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on as usual, and happy Monday.
It is. Mondays, you just kind of got to work some kinks out and then get going downhill in a good way for the rest of the week. But
is Monday like spring football? You have to get through it to get to fall camp into the games. You just have to make it through.
It's a necessary evil. You know, you got to embrace the suck.
Uh-huh.
Like, you got to get to at least get through Wednesday, right? And then once from there, it's go time.
I wanted to ask you, and we talk about, okay, now spring ball's over, and what was Matt Rule and 32 different players doing the Saturday after spring football? They were at a junior high camp in Omaha on Saturday. It was 2 different sessions, just shy of 400 3rd through 8th graders, and it was really cool. And it was important for Matt Rule and some of the teammates on Nebraska to get back into Omaha. And Jay, you're from Elkhorn, but you know the region of Omaha, and you know how big of a recruiting hub it's been, and it continues to be, and it's growing. I mean, it's a really nice focal point just up the road from Lincoln. But Omaha's got tremendous talent. But beyond that, it's more of an outreach. I want to be part of all of Nebraska. That includes Omaha, and quite an impression Rule and some of the players made.
Yeah, I think it's very important to the outreach and just show your presence and build relationships with the players, within the coaching staff. I think most importantly, I didn't have this issue, and not Schmidt, you didn't either. But growing up, Nebraska is one of the greatest football teams in the nation every year. Mm-hmm. Now these kids, they haven't seen Nebraska win a football game or be relevant in almost, it's been over a decade. So I think being up there, getting in front of these kids, obviously, first and foremost, community outreach is important. Helping out the kids and just, doing whatever you can is obviously very important within this program. But I think building this relationship with these kids and getting them back, not so they're not on their side, but hey, we're still a pretty good football program. We're still here. We didn't go anywhere. Now things are going to change, I think, rather quickly. But knowing that, building that relationship back up with these younger kids, especially in the metro area, because there's been numerous kids come from, whether it's been Creighton Prep or Burke or that have gone to other schools to play that probably 20 years ago are committing to Nebraska. And they're just look other options, and it's hard unless you saw Nebraska win a bunch of football games as a young kid. Your family's huge fans, but you're just trying to make Nebraska relevant again, and that's just part of it. And I think it's a great thing to do. It's also a good thing to keep these players active in the community. They've already done a fantastic job of that. They've seen it, on these the YouTube channel shows and stuff they've been putting out. I mean, they're doing something multiple times a week, going to hospitals, food banks, you name it. They're definitely building those relationships and getting these kids out in the public and keeping them busy. And that's important. But I'm glad to see them just work their way up to Omaha and in that metro area to help out, have some fun, and continue building that brand, right? Making that brand a little more relevant.
Well, make it relevant with your wins on the field, but while you're waiting for those wins to happen, do the legwork, right? The appearance, the time, the investment of time, that's important. Jay, I don't get the feel that Rule and his staff, they aren't taking any of Nebraska for granted. that is rural Nebraska, and that is for certain metro Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very, very true. And you've seen it as of, today, stopping by at Millard South and Platteview, Nebraska with dang near the whole staff, right? And, getting out recruiting. And I think in years past, coaches on staff took Nebraska guys for granted. I mean, when you were winning 10-plus games every year and you're a kid from Nebraska, there's 85% chance you're going to end up in Nebraska. I mean, for instance, it took zero work to recruit me to go to Nebraska. As soon as I got the offer, it was done, right? There's zero work. You got to work nowadays for it. And you have other schools coming in. You have other big-time schools coming in to the metro area and to the rural areas to recruit and build relationships and get their brand out there. And you can't take it for granted. And the efforts has continuing to be there. And they're going to do whatever it takes to get it back to where it was and where it needs to be. So it's always great to see the effort. I know I've used that word a lot, but it's just been really noticeable by this staff. And you've seen Coach Foley out and about in rural areas and schools, and it's just important to them. And I think the relationships they with Ainsworth, Nebraska, right, and the coaches there, it's just different. I don't know if any other schools or other colleges now. Nebraska is very unique in the fact that you have Lincoln, you have Omaha, but our surrounding, there's not a ton of other big areas that are close by. You're gonna have to get in the car and drive a couple hours. Grand Island, Kearney, Hastings, up Norfolk. You can't take it for granted, and they're putting the effort in there, and it's important because you just don't ever know who's coming out of there. Who's a seventh grader right now? Who's an eighth grader in some of these schools that in just a matter of a couple of years are going to be starting to get recruited, and you just want to build those relationships with coaches that are going to say, hey, FYI, we got a kid as a freshman right now. He's grown, 3-4 inches, gained 30 pounds, and he's going to be a problem. And you guys need to get in here, and I'll give you, you're just getting the heads up on it so you can put that extra legwork in and get ahead of the other, surrounding schools and in the Big Ten and SEC, Big 12, whoever it may be. So, it's fun to see them just not to underestimate anything, not take anything for granted, not get complacent. And there's nothing really to get complacent about. I mean, you haven't won, we haven't been bowl eligible in 8 years. So the legwork is being put forth, and I think that ROI is going to show up here rather quickly.
And Jay, do you think it's fair to say, along with this conversation, another reason why that this staff is finding success in Nebraska is that the way in which they operate their jobs kind of embodies the people of the state of Nebraska? Hardworking, they care about their neighbor, they don't take shortcuts. It just feels like a coaching staff that carries out their jobs in a way that embodies how generally the people in this state like to operate.
Yeah, I think, 100%. I think people are I think the staff's very appreciative of the opportunity, where other staffs have gotten in here and they almost see it as a negative thing, that there's so much attention. It's a fishbowl. You're only showing town. They find reasons to not do things. And I think the staff has found reasons to do anything possible. And just, I've seen it, and I've only been to a practice, but everyone's active. Someone has a job. Everyone's doing something. There's no sitting around. There's no one's feeling sorry for themselves. So I think that everyone's just, they are happy to go out in public with an N on their chest, in an Adidas quarter zip. I think they love going out as a staff and stopping by a local high school to say hi. And I think that just shows power. And I think that's the relationship building is important. I think that's lagged with other staffs in the past. Is I don't care if it's West Side, with one of the best football programs in the state, or if it's to an 8-man school in the southeast part of the state. Like, you have to continue to build relationships, because like I said, you just don't know. You don't ever know who's going to come through those doors and who's going to move into that area, who is who's a late bloomer, and all of a sudden their freshman year they're 5'8", 130. Next thing you know, they're 6'2", 200 pounds, right? And they're just an animal. And you just want to get that heads up before anyone else is, so you can send them a letter, whatever it is, shoot them something on social media, whatever it may be, just to really get your foot in the door early on. Because I don't know the data on, the success rate of being the first one to talk to recruit, but I got to guess the percentage is pretty high if he commits to you. And, so I think the relationship is obviously very, very important, and this staff definitely understands that. And that's why it's boots on the ground. It's cars are being driven, flights are going everywhere to build those relationships with coaches and programs, not only in the state but nationally.
It's Jay Moore with us here, Hail Varsity Radio, Blackshirt Hour at JMoore44. It's where you find him on Twitter. You watch him with Big Red Wrap Up. Jay, we've talked a lot about in-state and the work that's been put forth here by Coach Rule now just in year 2. And I want to kind of zoom out to get your reaction to Joel Klatt. Klatt does a YouTube show, and, of course, his work on Fox. We see him at Big Ten Media Days. You've got ESPN out with their way too early spring top 25 post-spring football. Nebraska didn't crack that, but he cracked the top 25. Nebraska did for Klatt's early preseason top 25. A lot of the reasoning from him is just projected better quarterback play, better turnover margin from your quarterback. And how's that grab you here? Nebraska, with one of the main people in college football, already getting that top 25 nod for this year.
Yeah, it's nice to see. It's something. I'm not hitching my wagon to that or getting overly optimistic by any means. I think, listen, I know Nebraska, this program has a hell of an opportunity to prove themselves this year and to finally gain momentum with the schedule. You're not going overseas to play your first game. You're not playing on the road against a Big Ten opponent. Your first 3 games are at home. Your non-conference games are at home. Your first 7 games are very, very winnable. So the ability to gain that momentum is one thing, but then you got to kind of factor in everything else, right? You got a defense that was pretty darn good last year, returns majority of the starters. You have an offense that had issues last year because of quarterback play. Well, you just got one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. You had a guy who won 5 football games back as well. Your offensive line, it should be improved. So you return most of those guys. You've gained some depth at other areas of on the offense where you were thin, and that's the wide receiver position. Running back room, you've gained some depth there. Tight end, you get guys returning, and you have weapons. So you kind of put everything all together. Like, yeah, it lines up to be a lot better. I'm not going to say it's going to be exponentially improved, but I think it's going to be a lot better. And a lot better is, man, you know what? This team should be bowl eligible next year. They should be. And but they still got to go out and play. They still got to go out and earn it. They still got to go through summer conditioning yet. They still got to go through fall camp. And they still got to, start game 1 against UTEP and see how that goes. But with everything that we've seen through spring ball, roster, continuing to keep the roster together in this day and age is a very good thing. And just with everything that's coming back, yeah, I mean, not surprised really at all by that type of that projection. You just look at the Big Ten in general, with USC and Stanford and Washington and Oregon coming in. It's a tougher conference, but I think Nebraska, what Matt Rule's done, and another factor, Rule's ability in year 2 to get teams up to speed and improve them. That's another factor that helps, get them into that, class 25. So I'm not surprised, but again, I'm not going, chips all in and ready to go at a college football playoff or anything like that. I think this is projecting in the right direction. Things are just lining up a little better. They're getting better every week, and it's just exciting that we're not wondering or I can't be the only one that sees things moving in the right direction. So it's always fun to talk about.
Jay, do you think preseason hype is good or bad for this team as it currently stands? Because I think for the most part, you sit back and you say the preseason hype, you don't want it, you want to ignore it, you want to focus on the work. But for a team that's been so down for so long, do you think there could be an element of confidence that can be brought from this, the fact that other people from around the country are seeing what you're doing?
Yeah, any type of, there's always going to be something being talked about Nebraska football, whether it's positive or negative. So if it's negative, you could take it one way. Oh, gosh. You could shoot down your confidence, or you say, F that, we're going to prove these people wrong. with more positive going forward. And usually here with, there's the Kool-Aid usually runs pretty strong in the off season, and there's a lot more positivity, and you could take it one way. Great. People recognize the hard work we're doing. Maybe you want to pat yourselves on the back, but I still don't think this team can get complacent or anything like that, where it's like, we still got to improve ourselves. We were 5-7 last year. We've struggled for a while. And 2016 obviously was the last bowl game you played in. So I don't think with any reason why I could imagine that with any positive outlook, this team should take it for granted and say, oh, we can relax now. That Jay Moore is saying this team's, going to be 8-4 or whatever it is. And Hail Varsity saying this, or whatever, or people on Twitter are saying this. So we can probably take an extra day off in there. It's like, I think this team's rather mature and the staff's not going to let that happen. They're on them day in and day out. They know it. And this team's hungry. I think this program is very, very hungry. You don't get the players back that easily could have turned pro back without having some maturity and some really a great outlook on what's coming for them this season. And I know this leadership's going to take them in the right direction, have the right mindset. So definitely not concerned with negative or positive outlooks within this football program during the offseason.
Jay, we'll wrap with this. Surprised that Tom Brady allowed himself to get roasted like he did. We've all caught bits and pieces of it. I got about halfway through it before I racked out. I missed the Gronk, and I missed the some of the 2-minute just evisceration by one of the stand-up comedians that's been on social media, but I caught a lot of it. What do you think? Are you his ego to me doesn't seem to be the type. I don't know Brady at all. I know some folks that have done some work with him, but he's pretty controllable. He likes to control things, I guess is what I'm saying, and that was really out of his control last night.
Oh, well, most definitely. I haven't watched the whole thing. I've just seen the bits and pieces that have been on social media as well, and yeah, it was unhinged, man. There was some stuff that was coming out that you can't be too sensitive. Especially, it's surprising in this day and age, but it's good. I think it's healthy that you have some of this, and if people don't like it, then don't watch it.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shows getting his teammates together, getting some comedians together, and just having a good time.
How about Levante David on stage?
What's that?
Speaking of former teammates, how about Levante David being seen on stage?
Oh, I didn't notice that. But let's be honest, he's getting paid too. He's getting paid to do this, so he's no dummy. I'd get roasted too if I was probably gonna make a couple $1 million for sitting there having a drink. People making fun of me for an hour or two. Sign me up right now. So
my friends make fun of me every single weekend for free.
Yeah, right. Sign me up. Just tell me where to show up, and I'll be there. So no, it's good. It was fun, man. I mean, the Gronk stuff. I mean, anybody that was in there. I mean, Dana White got it as well. So it was good. It's funny, man. The roasts are great. Hasn't been like this in a while. But is it officially on Netflix now, or it will be?
It was live last night, and then it's going to be there for your viewing pleasure for as long as you want. But I don't know who got it worse, Kardashian or Gronkowski, because everyone just made meathead jokes to Gronk. I mean, the guy was.
I feel worse for Kim because she wasn't even on stage.
Yeah. Listen, it's all. Like I said, if you showed up, you knew what you're getting yourself into, and I got to imagine she knows she was fair game if she was going to sit right there front row with cameras on her. It was only a matter of time before she was part of those 2-minute rants.
Yeah. Bird, we'll get caught up again. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Yep, sounds good, boys. Thank you.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Monday, Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Going to run down Matt Schick tomorrow, ESPNU and Sirius XM. Schick and Nick host. We'll check in with Schick tomorrow. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic joins us. Big thanks today to Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. Good stuff from Tim on recruiting, how things are working for Nebraska. Jay Moore also with us. And, of course, Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride, of Monday with Charlie. So check that out if you just missed part of it or want to hear it again or somewhere in between. Can check it out, Hail Varsity YouTube. Show's archived that way, and can watch us every day in that fashion, or Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Subscribe and like the Hail Varsity Radio pod. So we're going to bug out, get home, debating on a workout or not tonight. You've got NBA to watch.
Yes, I do. Nuggets Timberwolves game 2. Watching this one live. I got the hat on for those watching in the stream. It's been a somewhat lucky hat thus far. I wasn't wearing it on Saturday. The Nuggets lost. It's back on tonight. Bet accordingly.
I made my wife very angry.
With what?
Well, I critiqued Sterling Schmidt. He's our new puppy, the Bernedoodle. And I said, because when he kind of opens his mouth, it looks like he has meth teeth.
Yeah.
Because he's a puppy, he's losing his teeth, so he's got some are teeth, some are here, some are there. And I just said, what the hell kind of dog did you buy us?
Did you get this from the trailer park?
No, I didn't say that. I just said, why does Sterling have, I don't know, he can fit about 6 quarters between, teeth. And he's got kind of the Madonna gap going in several places. And whenever he smiles, I just laugh out loud because his teeth in his mouth are all jacked.
Well,
We're going to have the first dog in the history of America. We're going to have to pay for braces.
I have a great way to get back in your wife's good graces.
Move?
No. And we're not going to the divorce lawyer joke either. How about this? Elijah's second batch of candles is coming this weekend.
That's right.
For the low price of $20, you can make your wife's weekend.
Okay.
And it should be noted, because I think this is a violation of some sort. This is not advertising for the general people listening.
No, this is just for me.
Yes.
You're going to charge everyone else once you go public for $5, but you want me to pay you $20.
No, everyone else gets $25 eventually.
You're giving me a $5 discount. I appreciate that, man.
The scent, brown sugar and fig.
Okay.
There might be some notes of cinnamon as well.
I was hoping for the shame candle.
Cotton candy. No, that's going to be an experiment much further down.
Brass monkey and cotton candy.
I'm going with some of the things first that I know are going to smell good. I know brown sugar fig with a little bit of cinnamon is going to smell good.
Geez, all sorts of cinnamon. Yeah, we'll do that.
We'll work it out. I got new jars this time.
How big are the candles? No, she has candles lit all the time.
It's a 16-ounce 3-wick.
Okay. Wow.
So it's good for the price. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck. If you were going to a big candle company, they're going to charge you $35.
I was going to say flavors. What other smells are you developing?
We have a banana bread that I'm working on.
Wow.
Banana bread, brown sugar, fig, and then we have the mango creme brulee we've already got worked perfectly.
Look at you.
Look at that. I know.
Side Hustle Elijah. Back tomorrow at 4 on Hail Varsity. Thanks for tuning in.